Okay, good afternoon. It is 3 o'clock Eastern Time. I am Anto Budiarjo. Welcome to Monday Live. This is something we do every Monday to help us get through the pandemic and figure out what's on the other side. Panelists are listed on mondaylive.org. Just a reminder that the views expressed here are personal, not of any company or organization. Please do post comments and Q&A on the Zoom tools. I think you know how to use all of that, and complete the survey at the end of the show if possible. This slide deck is on mondaylive.org, so if there's any links that you're interested in, head over there and you can see this deck there. So our agenda today will have our normal sort of yik-yak about news and what's going on, and then our main theme for today is jobs, training, and education, and specifically how the pandemic is impacting all of that and what that looks like on the other side. And hopefully we'll have some interesting discussion. We have a number of slides from the members. The first one is from Roger, some interesting comment that we'll get to that came essentially from memory white paper, presumably. We'll get back to that. Ken Sinclair talking about his December issue, which we'll talk about that as well. John Petsy talking about, again, landlords and sort of the issues that property owners are having. So that'll be a good conversation. And Mark talking about some interesting opportunities, which obviously can sort of fit nicely into the theme of today in terms of jobs. It's sort of a global opportunity here. And those are all the slides. Let us start with Roger.
Yeah, sure. I just thought this was a little bit more of an upbeat article from Memori, just saying, you know, that lessons from the past can be looked at with PropTech and property management and stuff, and just saying that, you know, they've been through some crises before, but, you know, have come out the other side. And, you know, there's a lot of things where, you know, it's kind of some of the things we touched on before, where perhaps some of the technology things have been accelerated, you know, so that the performance of buildings are better and it's been looked at. And I'm really just saying, you know, indoor air quality, you know, automatic lights, enhanced HVAC controls, you know, all have the potential, you know, to have continue on, you know, impact will go on long after the pandemic. So it's quite a positive kind of article, you know, looking on for the industry, just saying, you know, whilst there may not be lots of new buildings coming along, you know, the current stock will need a lot of attention and hopefully a lot of good business for people as we move on.
Yeah, that's interesting, and that's good. I think that's a continuing theme that sort of fits in with our conversation today as well.
Hey, Roger, let me ask a question. This is Bill. In your experience, so we're in the middle of this pandemic scenario. Are you seeing any parallels to maybe past economic downturns that could spur increase in, or any other event that happened in the past that you could draw any parallels to, or is this just something completely new in your view?
I would guess that, I mean, in terms of movement of people and things, obviously, because I was traveling backwards and forwards to the States at the time of both the war in the Middle East and also during the 9/11. And, you know, there were times there where literally everything ground to a halt for a while. I don't think it was as sustained as this, because it was an event that kind of happened and then people gradually moved back, whereas this has been kind of stretching out for a long time. And in its own way, I think that might have some benefits for the technology, because it's giving people time to think about what they may want to do, you know, with the opportunities now, and that they are rethinking about work plans. Whereas I think before it was such a, you know, catastrophic change overnight that that it was more of a shock, whereas this is being a gradual process. So I think, you know, there's probably not a parallel with this, but there has been times, and certainly, you know, where there's been economic sort of failures before. It's kind of had a little bit of a shock wave and come back. And I feel the same about this, is that whilst all the remote working talk is going on and 60% and everything, I think what will happen is once everybody does get back, people will generally drift back to the office and centralize things. There might be more distributed type approach to it, but I do think people will drift back. So I just think there may well be some waves of going down and then coming back up afterwards, but not as sort of as constant as maybe it has been when we've had some of those other bigger events.
So let's move on to Ken. You want to, I know that you can't be with us for the whole hour. Do you want to talk about your slide and your December issue?
Yes, okay, our December issue is on a little bit early, but it's tomorrow. It's going to be December, so not that early. Where the theme is requesting innovation, and I've dug back into a bit of my history, the request for proposal, and it's suggesting that that might be something we kind of dust off and take a look at. And there are a few companies that are actually doing that, so that's kind of interesting. The other side, I think, that fits well into today's redefining our jobs is I very much believe that understanding innovation that is occurring and highlighting it, and basically trying to figure out what we can make out of what innovation is occurring and how we can best apply it, is kind of all of our jobs. And of course, it's radically changing everybody's job in our industry because they're working remotely. They're basically using Zoom. They're using all of the technologies that were kind of talked about have now become the core technologies. And although Boiler Room Bob was always kind of getting pushed into the technology, I think he just got pushed over a cliff and is now screaming that with all this data and stuff falling on him, and trying to figure out how to best utilize that, the innovations that are occurring. A lot of the stuff is already been there, and as everybody's pointing out, that's COVID is just a accelerator. So a bit of that. Nicholas from Sweden, our contributing editor, does a good job of sort of redefining what a building operator might look like moving forward. So it certainly is a different kind of a person than they have been in the past. I think I can chat a bit more about that if you wish.
Well, let's just get through the slides and then we'll come back and you can go first on talking about specifically about jobs. John, do you want to talk about your slide? You're muted.
There we go. Hey, yeah, I pointed out that thing about the landlord, not just to show bad news, but to show how this thing has a rolling effect, right? There's certain things that didn't happen at the beginning, but now happening, right? Property values are gone down, so they want taxes abatements or assessments, and this is just a continually rolling problem, even if behind us, we see it ending or hopefully ending or whatever. But the other two, I just did a little research, I guess we call it that. We used to call it surfing the web, but to look for some articles around on the topic of jobs, especially what's happening to recent grads, right? Because that's what we were talking about when we kind of proposed this idea last week was, let's talk about how we get new people into the industry. And I thought those two links were interesting and depressing.
You just got to leave it
about
there.
that when we get.
You're gonna leave it there?
Yeah, well, but no, the highlight was, the way new grads were getting into industry, not just ours, was through entry-level positions and internships. And those articles point to the fact the companies are eliminating those. They're not hiring interns. They're not opening, jobs for new entries, right? That don't have, 5 years of experience, that there is really a noticeable trend in that, and that's going to hurt the young people, recent grads, whatever, that we're talking about how we're going to get into our industry, right? So that's why I thought they were relevant. They're worth a follow-up click.
The most hostile labor market since the Great Depression. That's,
Yeah, for new grads. Yeah.
So Mark,
So I thought this article was kind of interesting in that it clearly states that investing in better buildings is the foundation of a post-pandemic city. And what was interesting is that it's not from the real estate community. It's from a global consortium of mayors of cities. And it's based on some new research that they just conducted that investing in green solutions, addressing COVID, COVID things, challenges, will definitely deliver a much faster economic recovery. Better buildings provide a solution that many of the problems facing our cities, including emissions, saving cost, quality of life for occupants, residents, et cetera, is what they go into. And this last one I thought was extremely interesting, a point of the article that retrofitting existing buildings have huge potential to create good, secure jobs. And since that's what we were kind of, part of our our discussion going further, today will be on jobs, education, and so forth and so on. But here you have an unlikely group saying this, mayors from around the globe saying this. So I thought it was, again, an interesting look at things.
okay, that's great. So let's talk about jobs. We've kind of have been quite a bit. So, I mean, what I'm sort of detecting is there's a lot of disruption in the jobs market likely in the next year. Maybe we should throw this back to Ken. You've kind of been observing this for quite a bit of time. I don't know how many decades, quite a few. Have you ever seen this sort of industry in this kind of disruptive sort of job market, or which is both good or bad? Is that a good way of thinking about it?
Yeah, I wouldn't think I've ever seen it, evolution occurring so quickly, of stuff that we kind of all had, we were kind of on the edge of, but now it's become forefront. So I think everybody is required to increase their technical skills. The one big advantage, of course, we have is that we have available to us YouTubes and the technology that it was always kind of there, and we would watch one YouTube, but now we have to watch several YouTubes because there's so much we need to learn. And part of what we're learning is just how to function in this new world. I'm finding great strength in the younger folks and just trying to see it through their eyes. We've done a few articles on being born connected, and it's just a different way of looking at stuff. We all came at this industry, and we learned controls, and then we learned IT, and then we so it's always been troweled on top of us. But for the generation that is now out there, they grew up with this stuff, and of course their younger folks, the Zillennials are, they basically grew up with a iPhone as a soother. So that's kind of a different twist as well. So the whole learning episode, I guess, is not so much maybe looking at our elders as maybe looking back at our young folks and seeing what they're doing, and the gamers and how that's being drawn forward. And we're starting to see a lot of the large companies are rising out of the games, which is an interesting thought too. So a lot of free thought. In some ways, it's a kinship to the birth of the DDC industry, because I was kind of grew up with all of those folks, and they were very weird at the time, but then they became sort of mainstream. And I think what we'll see now is that the COVID generation, the Zooming COVID generation will very quickly become the norm.
So is YouTube the new mentor? That doesn't sound right. There's a lot.
Not YouTube, but what is put on YouTube. YouTube is just simply a medium. How it is used. And the bigger problem is if we are to effectively get our messages out to the industry, we need to learn how to use these technologies and how to use LinkedIn and how to use, and we're falling on mediums that are starting to get old and dusty already in the kids' eyes. So we have to see what direction they're going and how that's going to move. So it's just rapid evolution that's occurring, and we have to kind of figure out how we can best do it. But we certainly have to move into. That's good to bring up the YouTube. Is the YouTube the new mentor? Yeah, it's not the new mentor. It's the old mentor. I mean, my favorite joke is that the millennials or the zillennials need to watch a YouTube to change a light bulb, and then you burst into laughter until you figure out how complicated it is to change a light bulb, because the light bulb might be Wi-Fi, and it might be LED, and it might be a bayonet pin, and it might be this, and it might be that. I don't know if you've ever gone to the store to buy light bulbs lately, but it's like several things. Like the simple light bulb has got very complicated, and yeah, you do need to watch a YouTube to get it set up. I think as an industry, we need to get our messages that we wish to get to the industry and to the owners and to the occupants more into these mediums.
Well, I'm going to have to support you wholeheartedly, of course, Ken, because I have a daughter in marketing who is, she works for a company that's marketing to what's called the influencer market, right? So, her market, she works in what's called the influencer market, right? And so her business is being on top of TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, the whole spectrum of stuff. And she's got a whole view on the world on what works for what demographic and how it works and and her business is getting what's called influencers, to influence product direction, messaging, and so forth, right, out into the marketplace. That's her business, right? That's what she does. So the fun part, of course, is you'd have to think that this group that we've got here doing on Zoom that we're doing right today, this is what you see in front of you is a bunch of influencers, right? There are strategic people on this panel who have direct influence on the market. People like John Petsey, Steve Fay, Jim Lee, Mark Peacock, not leaving out the rest of you guys, who've got a strong influence on the market and direction and what we do. And to your point, we've not, this is the first time I've seen a different approach to bringing influencers, into the space, right? And talking about direction and stuff. What we've done poorly is probably the outreach of that and how to do the outreach and how to do the push and stuff. We do LinkedIn because, that's a media where old guys like to live. But, there's a lot of other media out there. And to your point, I mean, that marketing space is changing dramatically on how you impact and influence the marketplace and the type of people, and like I said, my daughter lives and breathes that stuff. I listen to her and I have no clue on how she does it.
So let me throw this at you guys, and kind of echoes with both Ken and no, I guess it does and it doesn't. What you've talked about, the way, at least what I'm looking at, is those are mediums. To your point, Ken, you mentioned YouTube is a medium, okay? And to me, the challenge that we've got in our industry is that the perception, I still think, of folks who manage and operate our buildings, the perception of that job function or functions is still viewed as, somebody mentioned, boiler Bob type thing. I still think in general, that's the perception that exists in the marketplace today. We all know on this call that is not the case, that we have exciting, absolutely fantastic technology now that really is doing the things. Now, that all said, I had mentioned last month in an article for Ken that the mix of jobs that have emerged from the pandemic is going to be completely different than those that have been lost. And with that, this is a fantastic opportunity for our industry to capitalize on that, because there's new blood, there's new faces who are looking for that next opportunity. And obviously, what do we do collectively as an industry to get the word out, to change that perception and get these folks looking at our industry as job opportunities?
That's great. I got to say, and Mark, I hate to ever push back on the godfather of building automation. But, so my personal experience is I've been involved in this industry for 2.5 years. I'm not sure, Mark, I can connect building controllers, analytics, SkySpark software, all this stuff with the boiler room or where the mops are hung. I don't see as a new person, I couldn't see the connection at all. And for a 25-year-old or a 30-year-old, if we do what you suggest and use the YouTube and those platforms to get a new modern message out there, I think that those dots will not be connected. My opinion only, those dots will not be connected. I think we should get that out of our consciousness.
Well, do you think, in other words, I look at running a modern building today is I'm sitting in a control room, or I'm running a campus. I'm sitting in a control room. I've got 30 screens in front of me. I'm looking at building A, B, C, and D. There's a red light going off because some alarm has gone off. Or, you all and everybody on this call knows what I'm talking about. Versus, the stuff that's in the closet behind the scenes. And so that's how I kind of look at it. And do we do enough to bring that out more globally, I guess,
Right.
to potential people looking for jobs and opportunities?
That's the seminal question. Think about the folks on this call who came up through the industry for 20, 30 years. You can't help but think about that other side. But in today's world, my personal exposure has been just what you suggest: sexy screens and water-cooled servers and blade servers and data analytics and PhDs. And I know I'm going to make a personal commitment to use my voice on LinkedIn to sort of shine the apple a little bit in this vertical to see if we can attract some of this youth at a time when, as you guys said, the labor market is hostile. They're ready to find another attack vector to go get employed. And I think it's good time.
Well, I want to follow up on that side of it, right? We're talking
not
about
coming through, Joe.
people. How can we attract people? Let's see here.
No, you are. Okay, now.
I'm okay. We're talking about how can we attract young people, but what if there's nobody willing to take them in without experience? And I wanted to bring this up because there's at least 2 of the people on the call here who came up through the ranks when the big companies trained fresh outs, right? You could get a job, you didn't know crap, and they'd teach you, right? And where are those? And is that as much or more of a barrier to getting young people into our industry, right? I actually did some research ahead of time, went on one of the big job hunting sites, and I searched for BS engineers, technicians, and whatever. Zippo that didn't demand 5 years or more experience. How are we going to get them in? There was a day when Johnson Honeywell and the others made those investments, and a number of us are here because of that. I didn't come in through that, but when I was a entry level person, the guys I was working with did, and of course I was pissed. They always knew more than me, but I tagged along, and we learned it, right? What about that part that is fundamentally missing from our industry now?
Yeah, John, just to pick it up on what you said, I think if we can do anything to help guide the industry right now, is to get take advantage of what's going on right now, because our industry is one where you can't just do this, treat this like just an information only product. You've got to get your hands dirty. The way we all learn this industry, most of us, was to actually either program or go out in the field and configure systems. We had to understand how the mechanical systems operated in order to control them. We actually had to do it for real. And the only way I can see to accomplish that is through, for fresh outs, is to bring them through an internship program where they're working alongside people who are skilled. Mm-hmm. But if in fact other companies are pulling back on internships, it's an opportunity for us. We can get better talent. We can get more, A grade level of graduates coming out of colleges and technical colleges right now, because we do need that type of people coming into our industry.
Think about it, Steve, or what John said too. One side of the coin is, well, it's sort of our duty to do and pull the next generation up. That's all well and good.
Yeah.
But I'm going to suggest you've got to bring that youth in to save your company.
Right.
Well, is it in today's business climate, is it just the youth? I contend it's not just the youth. I'm not saying, no, it's not them at all. Yes. But again, what about these thousands and thousands of folks who unfortunately their businesses have changed. Some of them have lost jobs or whatever. There's been layoffs. We all have seen those. What about these people? They're not the recent college grads or the
certainly it's retraining programs. Mark.
Exactly.
Right.
So I don't want us to forget that pool, that I think the mentality is there from this large, tremendous amount of folks that are looking to your point, Steve, to get retrained, find another thing, because the industry that they've been in is changed forever, unfortunately.
That's the challenge we've always faced, right, Mark?
Yeah.
Our market has been that wide spectrum between OT and IT, right? Operational technologies, understanding what an air handling unit is, or VAV box, how it works, getting your hands dirty, sticking your head up there in the ceiling space, looking at a VAV box, all the way up to now that I've got a data point from that and putting it on a graph on an analytics application. I mean, that's a very wide spectrum of technologies. And we know there are few and far between of individuals who can do that, but teams of people who've got different aspects of that is really where I see a lot of benefit, right? And to me, there will always be two types of the engineers, right? The engineers who like to get their hands on, pull things apart, break them, see what they're made of, and see how they go back together. And the guy who wants to, sit on the computer and look at a YouTube and like, okay, I'll work it out from here. Nothing wrong with either model. It's just different folks with different applications. And in our space, we've got room for the whole spectrum. We've got room for engineers who want to get out there in the field and touch stuff and screw controllers to the walls and make stuff work. We've got room for people who want to do IT, cybersecurity, data. It's just a wide open field of spectrum that we can cover. And our challenge has always been there's very few people who can do end to end on that.
I think I'm hoping that one of the outcomes might be from this is that the governments will perhaps sponsor a little bit more of internships or apprenticeships, as it's called here, because what's happened is all those big companies that John was talking about stopped doing the training because they trained them and then smaller companies would just steal them. So they just said, this is bad news. And now, for instance, in the UK, 75% of the industry is system integrators, who are smaller companies that can't always afford to actually have all those apprentices. And it probably needs a bit of government sponsorship to help that along. And really at the moment, what I'm actually seeing is so much and so many of the kids, the younger people now are being driven into startups, but it's all that stuff we talked about before. It's the technology bit of what to do with the data and the services and the program and all the applications at a higher level rather than the grassroots level of on-site, getting the plant and the applications working to serve up the data. They're all going for the top end because it's far sexier to be up that end than it is, as Bill was saying, in the plant. And I think it's something that's going to probably need a little bit of sponsorship from the government.
So Roger, how is the UK government funding these apprenticeships? Is it through tax credits? Is it through direct payments? How are they doing it?
Yeah, so what they do is, I mean, obviously the education, once they come in, it depends on what level, whether they're graduates or they're straight from school, depends. But they actually give companies some money towards the whole training scheme. So it's normally a 3-year program. And they actually get money for doing that, the support for whilst they're at college. It is all monitored. If they come in and make sure that you're not just using them to make the tea and do all the other stuff, that they're actually getting education, that they're actually going to different groups and learning different things. So it's quite a well-structured system, and people are encouraged to bring them in. And certainly we did that here when I was with Tritium and before, just bring people in, and then they go through that 3-year process. But I have to say, it still gets to the point of where sometimes after 5 years or 3 years, 4 years, whatever, someone will want to come along with anybody who's any good, and a system integrator will come along and poach them by offering them more money because they actually like them, and you've lost your investment. Whether you actually consider you had good time out of those guys anyway, and it's part of the process you're giving back, is a different way of thinking about it, but that kind of does help it.
We have employees in US. The average age is below 30, I think. And I have Jacob Bell on the line, and so that he's been trained on Tritium and SkySpark for the last whole year. If you like, we can bring him on and we can ask him. That way the whole industry could see that this can be done. And we are doing it. We've been investing into computerized training we bought a platform in 2019 January. And we can just ask Jacob what he has done and how he got in, and he's only 23 years old.
Jacob, you've been thrown in the ring. Hopefully that's okay with you.
You need to unmute yourself, Jacob. And then also turn your camera on as well.
Perfect. All right. Hello, guys.
Hey. Hi.
Yeah, so as Alper said, I started out in Tritium on a really large project for that. So I started, and that was crazy to learn from nothing. This was coming from no knowledge whatsoever, going straight into control software like Tritium. And then slowly made my way to SkySpark slowly after that. And man, SkySpark is way better than Tritium. I just want to say, I definitely appreciate SkySpark a lot more. Tritium, there's a lot of tedious stuff you have to do with Tritium, that's for sure. But knowledge-wise, I know you guys were talking about YouTube versus training or stuff like that. I did do a little bit of training for SkySpark, but I think YouTube is crazy. It's so valuable with how much it has to offer for everything. So if you need to know anything at all, there's someone out there who's made an extremely complex video on the topic, and it's amazing. I think that's something that's really helped me along for where I'm at right now. But yeah, I'm Jacob.
Hey, so Jacob, how you obviously utilizing Niagara or utilizing SkySpark is one thing, but how do you get the application knowledge? Knowing you got, the pump's got to come on before the chiller. Where'd you get all that part of
Right.
the application training?
Yeah, so that I'm honestly working kind of backwards there, right? So I started controls, and from doing projects with controls, I'm slowly getting more of a grasp on the actual like application of it. I'm not quite 100% there yet, right? I don't do anything real world. I do everything on a computer. So practical application, I'm still.
We only do visualization and analytics, so he hasn't entered into the controls logic yet.
Yeah, but slowly but surely, I am learning through having to go through like the analytical side of it. I am learning.
So Jacob, this is Mark. So let me ask you this. What drove you to come to this industry versus other industries that obviously have technologies and so forth and so on? And then how did you learn about this industry?
Well, I got into programming on my own. So I didn't really get a large education in programming. I got an education in graphics, actually. But I got into programming because it's really helpful with graphics. And this job, right, we have to go through SkySpark. So we have to learn Axon. I'm doing a lot of Python. And I really enjoy that. And this just gave me an opportunity to explore this as well as learn about the industry. So
but how did you get from programming, assuming that sort of general sense programming, to doing programming here? Because you could have been doing programming for banking systems or whatever.
That's true. Yeah. So I don't have a large education in programming, so it would be pretty hard for me to get a job doing something more complex. And this is pretty low level. So right, like Tritium, just Java, super easy to do basic batch edit scripts or anything. Axon, right, also just a scripting language, so super basic. But it keeps me engaged in that aspect. So I'm learning more and more about programming as well as learning about HVAC and control software as well. So it's just a good learning experience for me, I think, is what really enticed me.
I love that comment that this is pretty low stuff. I mean, you old guys, come on, get with the program here. This is easy stuff. I'm not a real programmer.
Yeah, that is the key concept.
I don't mean it. I mean, it's definitely difficult for me.
I love it.
I stayed in a Holiday Inn last night, so I am a real programmer. You know?
On a side note, I wonder if the senior people in the industry don't, I don't know, dare I say, keep it complicated to keep their, I don't know, keep their position or their revenue streams or something like that. Just a side thought.
I think we're all just trying
you're
to
giving us
figure out what the
too
hell
much
happened. Sorry.
I think you're giving us way too much credit for that, Bill. I think it's more of an evolution than a revolution.
I got that, man.
Was that evolution or evolution?
Yes.
Hey, Jacob, question for me. What was your educational background, if any, before that? High school grad? You had any college, junior college?
Yeah, so 3D graphics. So I went into the making 3D art is what I went into, really honestly. A little bit of animation, a little bit of game art, and then a lot of programming for like game engines and stuff. And so that's when I got into like C#, which I also got into Java. And so it just helped introduce me into all that.
Great.
So you came in from the sexy end of the
Exactly.
spectrum.
Yeah, heck yeah.
Interesting.
Well, that's an area I think that we've always had a challenge with, is the user experience, right? And I think people come from the gaming side, bring us a significant amount of expertise on user experiences that we don't. My graphs suck.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Not that your graphs suck, obviously. That's
They do, Jacob. It's okay.
but yeah, what I do see a lot of the time is really old looking UI that's like hard to navigate. And for me, as someone who comes from games, right, understanding what I'm looking at, even though I don't necessarily understand everything about the site, I should be able to still get to what I want to in the site. And that's something that will definitely be improved with more people that come in from the games industry, as well as SkySpark, the more graphical revolution kind of thing. So that'll come eventually as well, for sure.
So for the rest of us, how do we get more Jacobs?
I think one of the things.
I think I have a different take on how we get more. And one of the problems that I see is one of economics. As an industry, we don't pay. We don't pay our lower level people. We don't pay our junior people. We don't pay our senior people.
Jim, do you think the 3D graphics industry pays? They're worse than us.
I'm sure that other industries don't pay as well. But what I was going to say is that structurally, that payment issue goes all the way to end customers. And this gets back to the discussion that Bill was having about, and Mark, about whether we separate the janitorial closet from IT. And the fact is that at customers structurally, in terms of contracts, when we go to sell contracts, they are willing to pay janitorial rates, which does not allow us to employ PhDs. And if we can't get to change that structurally, we can't either get or maintain young people. Jim Butler pointed out on the last call that as soon as the young technicians get the Cisco training, they're off to IT jobs that pay $10,000 more. To me, if we don't get to that structural problem of procurement from customers for end services and what people are actually buying, if there's a fixed low rate, labor rate that they're willing to pay across all contracts, we're never going to have good young people in this field.
Seems that every time you speak, Jim, it always ends up in procurement somehow.
It's true, Anto. It's the evilest part of the world.
Yeah, that's the transaction point, obviously.
That's right.
Going back to one of the core things about this, though, is I'm kind of encouraged about the speed that at least the industry has picked up on the training. Switching over to online from having to travel somewhere and spend a week being trained. I think that's encouraging because it's, again, from the economics point of view, people weren't always sent for either because they'd been out of work traveling, and so they'd be a day there and day back and couldn't take the training course. Whereas at least now there seems to be more and more online training, which I think hopefully will help somewhat to actually getting people up and running. But sometimes the costs are still prohibitive, but it would be good to see some more of that online training being made on the fundamentals.
Well, I think we can circle all that back to our earlier discussion, which just heard it from Jacob, right? I mean, the amount of resources and capabilities that YouTube, he goes to YouTube for everything, right? And we were talking about using some of these newer technologies to help, to help bring these younger folk on. I mean, that's the challenge, is the training and how to get the people there. And if Jacob's absolutely telling us that YouTube is a valuable resource, then that's something we should be jumping all over.
I'd like to say, first of all, Jacob, you ought to take a screenshot, man. Here you are, 23, on a call with these giants. These are the giants of the industry. They invented the industry. Chad makes a great point, and it's something we've talked about on this panel a lot about. It's there. How we talk about it, how we present it, the context we create is going to make all the difference. So I think the only question is, can we get out of the way of ourselves? So,
but what does that mean? And going back to the Boiler Bob, and Jim also frequently talks about escaping the janitorial closet. Do we actually need to do that, or is that just a wrong frame of mind? I mean, because what we're basically saying is that we can't work without the skill sets that are necessary for Bob.
I don't know. If you tie anything, in my opinion, if you're tying anything today to that janitorial closet that scarred all of you people, you're doing the wrong thing. Right. When I think of building automation, and remember, I'm new, probably Jacob, the same thing. I think of distributed software, SkySpark, and smart buildings, and PhDs, and banks of monitors. I don't think we tie anything to the broom closet moving forward, Anto.
But somebody still needs to do that.
It's okay. Doesn't mean you have to market it.
Okay, so then you're advocating for separation.
Bait and switch. Okay, no, this will be easy. You'll only have to touch your keyboard. Now crawl under that over there on the floor.
Jacob, these guys, you know what? Delete that screenshot. These guys are all scarred, man.
So do you think one of the challenges that our industry has faced and continues face, that when it comes to education and getting more people into our industry, again, all the different, whether you're data side, system integrator side, business side, sales side, doesn't matter, that the industry is not unified, that every company is looking out for themselves, and that we collectively as an industry are not doing anything. We're not doing as much as we can be doing or should be doing to further educate what the industry is doing.
Yeah, Mark, so to pick up on what you're saying, if you look at governors and mayors around the United States, they have, one of their jobs is to sell their community to bring in jobs and et cetera, right? So you'll see, like Governor, was it Chrissy Nome from South Dakota? She's been all over the ads now selling the wonders of South Dakota. Come move here, great lifestyle, all this good stuff, right? So, but that's very typical. Where do you go in our industry? Which organization, ASHRAE, BOMA, you name it, is out there leading or presenting why come into this industry? Who's doing it? I've never seen it.
Right.
And we're missing that. We're truly missing somebody in a leadership position that creates has marketing money to go out and market our industry as a place to work and to have a long-term career. Because look at us, we all have 40-year careers in this damn industry. That's impressive. How many industries can say that? So I think there's a lot to sell here, but there's no vehicle to sell it. And so I think if we're going to do anything, that's what we need to, there's a couple things, a smart building and sustainability. You've got two big terms that I think Jacob's generation can relate to. They want smart buildings and they want the buildings to be sustainable. Who the hell's pushing that? That this is the place to come get it.
Chad just commented that many people, many sort of common folk, as they were, don't even know that there is a thing such as building automation. You know, the fact that buildings are being controlled by these sort of mysterious devices and people, that's not obvious to people.
That's right.
There could be a great YouTube video about building automation and all the cool stuff it does, but it doesn't exist anywhere.
But that was my opening comments though, Steve. That's why in the marketing world of the new technology, it's all upside down. It's no longer about doing ads and promos. It's all about the influencer market. And I'd be surprised if Jacob isn't aware of this, is that, you know, they look to the influencers. Who are the peers in my industry who are talking about that? That's who they listen to. That's why I follow on Twitter, and that's why I've got all the people that I follow on. That's where I get my influences these days. And our industry is not embracing this approach, right? We're still thinking about old school of doing, someone mentioned that in the chat, doing webinars, these boring old webinars that causes everyone to fall asleep. You know, the reason I go to YouTube is because I want to learn one specific little thing. You know, I don't want a 2-day training class. I want to do the one thing of how to caulk a floorboard, right? Show that to me in 30 seconds. I want to learn it and go, right? And we're still thinking old school approaches to this. The technology is there. We're not using it like everybody else is using it, and that's part of our challenge.
I'd like to ask everybody a question. I mean, I think it was something Bill brought up earlier, is about, you know, overcomplicating things to protect ourselves. I mean, the industry's got a bad reputation for doing that going back, but is there potential for technology to actually de-skill some of the lesser required parts? So you have perhaps more factory package control, so at least it's bundled more. When you got more edge products, they can become self-binding. It becomes wireless as opposed to having to be wired. I mean, there's still well, and it's got to be added to it. But then at least it becomes more of the technology part of bringing those components together. Yes, you still got to know about the pump and the boiler and whatever else, but is some of that technology, you know, when you're going for standards, because, you know, if I write a control loop, guess what, you know, and Antos is better than mine, and, you know, Steve will write a better one than I do. That we've always had that in our industry. Instead of saying, okay, there's only one way this thing can work, you know, a control loop's a control loop. Surely there's time for some standardization just to help things along and speed along, to get some of that drudgery bit out of the way, and just help people get on top of the sexier part of maybe binding and pulling the thing together and getting the data out.
Is that possible? I mean, AI is obviously the other thing that's coming down the road. Does that close the gap enough, or is there still something that
you have to assume so? You know, it doesn't take long to work out how the combinations of what an air handler can do, or what all the component parts of it. Surely an AI program could at least pull that together.
Before AI, we need to have distributed architecture. Then we will have AI, because we need good historical data.
You got it also. There's a lot of historical data sat on here.
Good one, Roger. Good one.
But so sort of that basically what Roger's talking about is waiting on, relying on technology to address that gap that is not being filled by the entry-level jobs. I'm not sure if that.
But don't you think the technology exists today? You don't have to wait. If we keep waiting for the next great thing, we'll never get there.
Well, maybe it exists, but it's not being utilized in that way. Maybe it's an adoption.
It's not utilized that way. Not yet, at least.
All the AI stuff is being done off-site, not on-site, to my knowledge. Yes, it's done perhaps down at the low level in one or two things on a chiller or whatever else, but not at the combining the components at this time, to my knowledge.
If we are going to try to get people to work on serial buses, it is like calling your generation to pneumatics.
Yeah.
And did you have fun working on pneumatics?
But that's a perfect example of why there should be a 5-minute YouTube on the serial connection Alper, right? I mean, when I do a serial connector, I do a 9-pin serial versus a 25-pin, man, there's 20 people on YouTube. I can look that up tomorrow. How many
times we went through a job where we couldn't get the Modbus data working because we made a mistake on the pin layouts, or I went through that.
Hey, you know, as someone looking from the outside in, I think there's enough cool, sexy technology to bring people into this industry. We're seeing it with Jacob. We just don't put it out there. I think this is a marketing conversation by and large.
Yep, that was my argument from the beginning. It's a marketing conversation, and we're not using the tools that are around there that everybody else is.
Yeah.
But if we don't, but you guys agree with me that we need we need to affiliate ourselves and get an organization that we can work with that can help, you know, put the money into this and help legitimize our effort. Because if we just all go off individually and do our own thing, I don't think it's going to get any traction.
Yeah, it needs
got to be sustained. There's got to be money. There has to be a budget. It has to be professional. Has to be state of the art and look and feel. You know, I think it's a marketing problem, but you got to invest in it like anything else.
So what comes to mind to me is the motivation of that money or those resources, and I'm not sure what that is. I mean, we mentioned government potentially, and you know, we're talking about cities, mayors, as you know, trying to drive the economic development. So where's that motive? Where are those resources going to come from? I agree with you that it needs to be organized, but where's it going to come from? Silent.
I think you could put a coalition together pretty easily. And I also think you can work at the local level to start communicating to your own few thousand people on your own small world. I'm going to make a commitment myself to start putting some stuff out there. Just as you got to go bigger, but you can start in your own garden too. I'm sure of that.
Somebody, I saw a statistic, and I think I mentioned to the group here on a Wednesday call that we had, that a month or two ago, there was roughly 23,000 identified open jobs in our industry. Again, across the board, developers, whatever. But that's a significant amount of jobs, opportunities. How do we fill them?
I wonder what a virtual forum would look like. A forum not that dissimilar than this, to talk about what's going on to new college grads and so forth. I wonder what that would look like.
You know, I'm with you, Bill, because back to bringing on, and again, I'm push my barrow a little bit further. I mean, the influencers in our marketplace are the cities, are the mayors, are the people who are trying to, you know, giving them a platform to come and talk about what they want to do. The problem I've got at the moment is they're disjointed, right? I know, you know, they're all over the place. I know you can go to this session, that session, but if I can go, is there a, you know, I don't care if it's a podcast, a forum, a thing to have these people present their vision of what they need to do or want to do in the aim of sustainability. You know, a fun one we're getting right now in the APEC marketplace. There's huge discussions about turning all of the rooftops not into green spaces, but indoor gardening. There's a huge push to indoor gardening on all the roof spaces in the APEC market, meaning that they're trying to push local produce and everything, you know, for which means controls and all sorts of stuff going into this thing. And that's being pushed by a lot of the cities, right? And the city mayors. Give them a forum to come and talk about the things that they're talking about.
Now look at that picture behind you, Anno. I mean, that's building automation.
Count them.
You know, think about all the marijuana that's being grown. That's building automation. Like whatever industry that excites someone, it's you guys.
Yeah. And giving these people these, and these are the influencers in our market, right? These are the people, there are folks out there who want to talk about the mayors, the cities, who want to talk about their initiatives. And their challenge has been, and you know what happens, right, is they talk about these initiatives and they run smack bang into the big boys, I won't name names, you know, who just, oh, we got to go back to this and, you know, we got to kill it and go to old technologies and like, you know, and it all dies on the vine.
I think that's coming up to the top of the hour. We have to wrap this up, but I think that's a good note to leave it.
Nice. There's one last note, Jacob. Someday this will all be yours.
You can have mine tomorrow.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, well, thanks, Jacob, for joining us. Thanks, everybody on the team here and all the attendees. Lots of lovely comments. We'll get the YouTube of this up, talking about YouTube, by tomorrow morning, and we'll be back here next Monday.
All right,
so
fantastic.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.